We're gonna start with your childhood and where you grew up.
Yep.
What part of this earth did you grow up?
Man, I grew up Cutoff, Louisiana,
Yeah.
down there in Lafourche Parish, about 2 hours or so from here. Middle of nowhere, man, absolutely nowhere. If you drive from my house where I grew up, if you drive about another 20 minutes south, that's it. Into the country, you're at the Gulf of Mexico. There is no more country left after that.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of imagine, man, it's such a small place. There's no music community out there.
Right.
You know, Homa, which is about 30 minutes away, they had a scene for a little while. You know, they had the Brick House, really huge place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, after COVID, the dude ended up losing it, and the building's not even there anymore. It got bulldozed. They had a couple other places. You know, the Intercoastal Club got wrecked after the last storm, but I saw they actually just reopened, so hopefully they start doing things there a little bit. But as far as, you know, where I was from, there was no live music, anything. Maybe Homa, maybe once every month, you know, maybe once every other month, very, very sparingly. So there was nowhere to actually see live music.
Yeah. How long did you live there?
Oh, man, 18 years. Whenever I graduated high school, I moved out of my parents' house about a week after high school graduation. And, you know, bounced around from a couple places here and there. Lived in Homa for a couple of years and moved up here to the North Shore about 3-4 years ago, somewhere like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my wife was originally from up here, so you know, we were living in two different places. I was living in Homa at the time. My lease came up. I'm like, hey, we just move in with you, you know, and been here ever since.
Yeah. How'd you like home? And it must have been a great change of pace from Cutoff.
Yeah, it was a cool place, man. You know, definitely more to do, you know, as far as, you know, whenever I say there was nothing down there was nothing down there. It was Walmart, man. I remember in high school, we used to just go hang out at Walmart for fun.
That's rough.
You know, there wasn't nothing to do, man. I'm talking about, you know, park your truck in like the Sonic parking lot. People would just hang out at the Sonic parking lot. There was nothing down there.
Yeah.
You know, if you're into like hunting, fishing, you know, they say it's sportsman paradise. It really is. But if that's not really your scene, man, there's nothing to do.
Yeah.
So whenever I moved to home, it's, you know, it's a lot cooler, man. There's actual, you know, places you can go check out some music, even if it's just cover bands and stuff. You can still get out. The place where we lived, it was like right behind the big shopping district.
Mm-hmm.
So we were right there. But I tell you what, I love the North Shore way, way more. Covington,
sure.
Mandeville area is beautiful, man. It's in a perfect centralized location.
Yeah.
You know, we're about an hour from New Orleans. We're an hour from Baton Rouge. About an hour and a half from Biloxi.
Mm-hmm.
You know, anything that's coming to town, we're there. Just an hour out of the way, we can go see it.
Sure.
It's an easy spot.
When you were, I'm going to back it up just a little bit. When you were coming up in Cutoff, were your parents big music fans? What did you have to work with at home since there was no live music around you outside the house?
No, they weren't really too into it, you know. Music wasn't really in the house a lot.
Yeah.
My dad liked, you know, classic 80s rock. I remember being like a little kid. You know, we'd go somewhere, we'd get in the truck or something. You know, you'd play like Kiss or, you know, something like that. Motley Crue, Def Leppard. But it wasn't like a staple. Like, it wasn't a big part. It's like,
right.
You know, whenever we're driving, we'll put on the radio. Whatever's on the radio is coming on. That was the only music in the house.
What were you drawn towards, and how old were you when you started to make those decisions yourself? Like, go seek out your own music?
Probably high school.
So it became more relevant in high school?
Became more relevant in high school. You know, elementary school, middle school. I liked what everyone liked. You know, back then, 3 Days Grace was really popular. Avenged Sevenfold, Five Finger Death Punch, Disturbed, Skillet, Cedar. All those guys were really popular. And that's it. That's all I really listened to. I got to high school and I started to really diversify it. Mm-hmm. You know, I got into different genres of rock and metal, not just, you know, your top 40 hits that's on the radio. Mm-hmm. You know, people forget, you know, back then it was kind of a pain in the butt to listen to music. You know, you didn't have Spotify or anything. We had Pandora. Pandora, that was just, you know, you can't pick what you want. At least back then, you couldn't pick what you want to listen to. You just put on a station and hope something good comes on, or you had to like look up the stuff on YouTube. But, you know, you couldn't just like open up your phone, pop up an app, and I want to listen to this song by this band with no ads, no nothing.
Sure.
It's a lot easier now.
It's a double-edged sword, I think, because it's so convenient, and that's a plus. But it's changed the way that we consume music.
Yeah.
And because on the radio, you were forced to listen to whatever they played.
Yeah.
So you got to hear different things that you never heard and take the good with the bad, or see some good in things that you may have just written off initially. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And nowadays, like, you know, people might not understand what the B-side is, which was a valuable resource to people that, you know, maybe they bought a single for the A-side and then they found the B-side to be equally as appetizing, you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I see it both ways, I guess, you know, but I mean, it's a bygone era. What years are we talking about when you, let's say, what year was it when you made the move to Houma? Because by then you had graduated. In high school, you started finding your own in the way of music, I guess, right?
Yeah, man, so I'm a young guy. Throws a lot of people off. Everyone's like, oh, man, I thought you were way older. I'm 25. It was like, oh, man, I thought you were 35. I'm like, it's not the compliment you think it is. You know? So, you know, remember, I graduated high school 2015, got into high school 2012. Let's see, I moved to Houma. I was probably about 19, somewhere around there. Lived there for a couple of years. I moved up here I lived there for about 3 years. I moved up here when I was about 22, 25 now. Yeah, that math works out.
Yeah.
And I didn't start going see live music until I was 18.
Oh, wow.
There's nothing down there. You know, bands, they might, you know, come to like New Orleans or Baton Rouge or something, but, you know, my dad was not taking me to New Orleans.
Right.
You know, to go see, you know, some band that he'd never heard of at some club he'd never heard of. You know, my parents were definitely afraid of Baton Rouge and New Orleans.
Yeah.
And, you know, I get it. You know, some areas are a little shadier than others.
Sure.
But I didn't, you know, start going see bands until I was 18. And I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't know where the venues were. At that time, I only knew what the Brick House was, because that was in Houma. I didn't know, you know, like Southport Hall. Back then, the Varsity was really big. They had the Spanish Moon that was really big. I didn't know where all these places were.
Sure.
You know, I would just, you know, go to a place. I'd see a band playing there. I'd go there for the first time and, you know, cross my fingers and hope it worked out, because I'd go by myself.
Yeah.
You know, my friends weren't really... I had friends. I didn't have... You know, I had very tight friends. You know, I didn't associate with a huge group of people. I had maybe 2 or 3 friends in high school.
Sure.
We graduated. They joined the military. They're out, you know.
So square one again.
I'm like, man, all right, well, I guess I'm going to these things by myself. You know, I hope it's in a, you know, safe part of town. You know,
Right.
I've never been here before. Never drove through like a city or anything before. It was new. You know, I was like country bumpkin.
Right,
you know?
right.
The first music thing I ever went to was Warped Tour 2015. I think they had it in New Orleans. That was the first time I'd ever seen live music, and I was hooked. It was so incredible.
Big way to see live music for the first time.
And man, you know, I remember hanging out. I didn't go to the big stages because there was a bunch of people. I'm like, oh, I don't want to stand 200 feet back to see these bands. I spent most of that day hanging out on the Full Sail University stage, where it's all of the really small artists, and I still remember them all to this day. I don't even think some of them I know aren't around. I saw Bad Sea Rising, incredible. I wish they would have never broken up. I saw Pele Royale back when they were... No one knew who these guys were. There was like 20 people standing in front of that stage with me.
Yeah.
Now these guys are touring the world. That's so awesome to see,
Wow.
you know?
Yeah.
I remember, as a matter of fact, the coolest thing, I still have it. The guy signed a CD for me. And I'm just, you know how they set up just, you know, tents and booths everywhere.
Sure.
You know, I'm just walking and by myself. The guitarist from Pele Royale sees me from his booth. He's like, hey, you were watching our set. Come over here. Gave me a CD, signed it. He's like, dude, just thank you for supporting us.
Nice.
And that was so killer.
Class.
Yeah. First, you know, club show I'd ever went to. Again, I was 18. It was at the Varsity Theater in Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
Islander was coming to town. And I didn't know who Islander was, but Bad Seed Rising was on the bill with them. I saw them at Warped Tour. Loved them. I'm like, oh, hell yeah, I'm going to go see them again.
Yeah.
So those two, and local support band was Ventress. I didn't know who Ventress was. I thought Ventress was a touring band on the tour with them. I had no idea these guys were local.
Yeah.
And if you know the band, they're all such cool dudes. Ben, 12 feet tall, nicest guy in the world. There wasn't a huge crowd that night because, no one ever heard of Bad Seed Rising. Islander wasn't really that big at the time. They were still kind of new. So there was like maybe 40, 50 people there. The guys from Ventress came like, oh, dude, thank you so much for being here. Shook my hand. Oh, man, we really appreciate it. And, whenever that kind of stuff happens, you start kind of realizing like, man, this is really a tight-knit community. Like it feels genuine. Like they're not just trying to sell me a CD or something. Like they actually appreciate you being here, and that's a really cool feeling.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it has a lot to do with why they get in it for the first place.
Yeah.
And you could tell that with your interactions like you're talking about. And when they're performing, their performance depends on the energy from the crowd, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
You could have two different performances from the same band on 2 consecutive nights, and it'll have everything to do with the crowd, nothing to do with them because they're consistent. You know what I'm saying? It's amazing. So you're discovering music in a big way, really, for the first time, and following how long did you stay at Houma, in Houma?
There were about 3 years.
3 years,
yeah.
Okay. And then you came to the North Shore.
Yeah.
And what changed for you? You were starting over again, basically. The only person you get, one person that you knew.
Yeah, I had my wife.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. I had one person here that I knew. But, you're still going to shows, but you're not going by yourself. Thankfully she goes with me now. I don't have to go by myself. Now it's so weird if, I have to go to a show without her.
Yeah.
So, man, we've been, been married for, edit that out in case she watches
this. Don't screw it up, man.
We might edit this part out in case she watches this. She's going to come home 2 years.
What was that long pause?
It's so weird to not go to a show with her.
Yeah.
But I never really felt like I was alone because, you start going to these shows and you make friends because it's all the other people going to all the local shows.
Sure.
I used to make a lot of friends just going to a show and walking up to someone like, hey, dude, that's a killer t-shirt. And they were wearing like a local t-shirt or a metal t-shirt. And then you just start talking.
Yeah.
And then, cool, you talk for 10, 15 minutes. Next weekend, you go to another show. You see them again at the next show. You talk to them 10, 15 minutes. And you start to really make friends that way.
Yeah.
The North Shore kind of suffered the same issue that Houma had, though. Whenever I first moved up here, there wasn't really there was a lot of live music. You go to Covington and Mandeville, and you can't throw a rock down the street without hitting a venue that's doing like a cover band. But there was no original artists, which is crazy because there's so many really good original bands on the North Shore. Their hometown is Covington and Mandeville and Hammond and Slidell.
Yeah. There's
nowhere for them to play out here. So we were still just, hey, let's go to New Orleans, go to the Twist of Lime, let's go to Mid-City Ballroom out in Baton Rouge, let's go, this band's coming to Southport, let's go Southport.
Yeah.
And, I always tried to go see as many bands as possible because I love them. Whenever I first started going to see live music, I was a nerd. And I kept a list of every band I'd ever seen. It started with Warped Tour. Because, I didn't really know who any of these bands were. I'm like, well, every band that I watch, just write them down on my phone, and I'll go back later and listen to them. And that just kind of developed into a list that I've kept, these past 7, 8 years, and I've seen almost 300 bands.
Nice.
That's been added to that list, all between national acts and local acts.
Sure.
And it's kind of cool to see, like, oh, man, I've seen, like Ventress. I've seen Ventress, like, 13, 14 times over the years.
I found that I really I like doing what you're talking about, and I think that resonates with people because anybody, let's just say, for another area of life, they could say, I fell down the YouTube wormhole. You go you keep digging further and further
Yeah.
into something, and you kind of forge your own path through it. So I mean, that appeals to people like that. But I've always found it personally satisfying to be able to find new bands. Excuse me. And the only way that I know to do that is to just dig and dig and dig.
Yeah.
And I've also found that I find myself more interested in a band when I have some sort of personal investment in them. Like
Yeah.
I've seen them at a show, or I had their first CD, or you know what I'm saying. There's some point of contact, or I met the drummer one time, or
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying. So you gain interest in these people, and you want to dig into them further. It's really enjoyable. I think it's part of what's awesome about music.
It really is, man. You know, the way that we listen to music today, you know, we got Apple Music, Spotify, all that. It's never been easier to discover new artists, but it's also never been harder. Because we have everything at our disposal.
It's too much.
It's so easy. It's like, you know, like all the streaming service. If you have Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and Disney, yeah, you have a lot to watch. It's hard to pick what you want to watch.
Yeah.
And then you usually end up, you know, looking at it for like an hour.
That's me.
And yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I'll just watch, you know, this episode of this sitcom.
Yeah, I don't
I've
even
seen,
care anymore. I'm
you know,
digging
700
too.
times before.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's never been easier to go up and discover new music, but you don't that often because
Yeah.
you get so comfortable with, well, this is my playlist. These are the bands I listen to. You got to really force yourself to search out new artists. And you know, it's crazy. There's so many, like take the Gulf Coast, for example. We have such a rich scene here. There's so many young, talented bands between, you know, like Lafayette here in Louisiana, working down the coast to like Fort Walton Beach or Pensacola, Florida.
Sure.
There are so many incredible talents out there. And, you know, you go to a show, you might not know who they are, but maybe you know one of the bands that they're playing with, and maybe they're one of your friends. You're just going on a Friday, Saturday night. And then hey, you find some, you know, you completely fall in love with this band that you didn't really care about 2 hours ago whenever you were driving to the place.
Yeah.
You know, give a shout out to the Gulf Coast community here. There's so many incredible bands. You know, we got Seven, Pardon the Scars, Envision, Ventress, Wildfire, Brave New World out of Pensacola. There's, you know, in New Orleans, there's Drab, She Might Be a Beast. There's so many young bands that are popping up that it's so hard to... It's weird. It feels like after COVID, there was an explosion of new bands, which makes sense. I mean, you know, these are probably bands that they're new to us, but they've probably been doing this in the 2 years that we were all locked in. Mm-hmm. And now they can finally play. That was the case with Pardon the Scars. I'm like, man, I never heard of you guys before. Like, yeah, we debuted 2019 right before the lockdowns. So,
dude, I've interviewed two different artists that COVID is the reason for their last album. Mm-hmm. And yeah, point blank, because one of them was a solo artist, and he would have kept doing whatever the band he was playing with was doing.
Yeah.
Or, you know, he played with several bands. He would have just done gigs with those guys, but instead it actually was the catalyst for him making his first solo effort.
Yeah.
Super cool, you know? I was really floored by the way that COVID affected creatives, you know?
Yeah, it did a lot for a lot of people. There was a lot of bands that broke up during COVID. You know, 2019, I was the vocalist for Zinc metal band out here. You know, COVID came, we couldn't play anymore. We just stopped, we kind of broke up, you know? There's a lot of bands that broke up, which is unfortunate. There's a lot of bands that took that time, said, well, you know, we can't perform right now, but we can write, we can go to the studio, we can record. You know, we can really spend this time honing our craft.
Sure. And
come out swinging.
Explore.
You know?
Yeah, definitely.
And I think once, you know, the lockdown stopped and, you know, people came back, I think you can really see who spent those 2 years just kind of sitting around waiting and who spent those 2 years still diligently trying to hone their craft.
That's a good point, yeah. So you've moved to the North Shore, and you're kind of at square one as far as socially again, being in new surroundings. What causes you to start booking bands at a bar?
The opportunity presented itself. So, like I said, me and my wife, if we wanted to go see live music, so we're not that into cover bands. I like them. There's absolutely nothing against them.
Yeah.
But, it kind of gets old after a little while. I like original rock and metal.
Yeah.
So we'd have to go to Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Biloxi, whatever. And hated driving an hour to go see anything, you know. So whenever a new venue opened up in Mandeville, the Hideaway Den and Arcade, it was the first time I'd ever seen some original bands on the North Shore, and it was the first show they ever did. It was back in January of this year. It was Pious, Thornprick, and Dead Machine Theory. Thornprick and Pious, both right here on the North Shore. Dead Machine Theory coming out of New Orleans. I'd seen Pious once before at the Twist of Lime, really liked them, and I was giddy. I was excited, man. I'd never heard of this place, and I'm like, oh man, we only have to drive 30 minutes to go see a show instead of an hour.
So nice, right?
I'm like, man, let's go. And we get there, it was a good people. It was like, 50, 60 people there, pretty good, and there was a lot of people that we knew, and everyone and their mom came. I think everyone kind of had that same level of excitement to them, like, oh my God, it's an original show here on the North Shore.
Right.
And it was a killer show, a really cool place. And, from there, I decided, I'm like, you know what? Let me reach out to these guys. I know a lot of bands. Over the years, I've made a lot of friends. And really, it was kind of selfish on my part. I'm like, I'd love it if this band came to this area. I don't want to have to drive an hour to go see it. Really, it was more me being lazy.
You were door dashing a band,
yeah,
right?
it was really me being lazy more than anything. I'm like, man, I can cut my drive time in half if I try and bring them here.
No shit.
So I reach out to the venue, and we get to talking, and they're like, oh yeah, we just bought this place a couple of months ago. This is actually the first live performance that we have, and man, we were so happy with it. Everyone was so nice. Like, we'd really like to do it again. Like, well, can I book something here? And they're like, yeah, sure, why not? They didn't know who I was.
Well, let me ask you this, because I remember seeing them announce the place opening. And I think they had something different in mind for the space than what it's become. And this is in a short period of time. It's a year.
Yes.
So it's kind of transformed during that time.
It's so crazy to think we're in December now. It's only been a year.
Yeah.
They've evolved so much. Originally, the place used to be called Mandeville Social, and it wasn't much of anything.
Did it transfer ownership into the Hideaway?
Yes, they had bought it from the previous owners.
Gotcha.
At that time, it was, still just kind of like a little arcade. They had a few video games, like a few VR games, but they weren't doing too much.
Right. And that's what I saw. I was like, that's interesting, an arcade.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll stop there. I'm not a video game dude, but I'd have to go see the presentation.
Yeah, it was a place for kids when they had it. And occasionally, I think the owner would, have her girlfriends over. They'd do like brunch and stuff like that. Yeah. It wasn't doing too much.
So they were just kind of, I don't know, trying to see who they were going to be, I guess.
Yeah, well, whenever they bought it, they're like, man, we really want to do entertainment here. So what initially, kind of gave them the idea to it. It's a husband and wife that own it. It's Millie and Daryl Rollo, two of the nicest people on earth. Daryl, his background is in comedy. He's been a comedian here in Louisiana the past, I think, 7-8 years.
Yeah. He had a podcast for years, didn't he?
I'm not too sure. I know that he's done a lot. Him and another guy, Josh Watts, they do North Shore comedy out here.
Gotcha.
But he's always been, active in the comedy scene the same way I was active in the music scene.
Okay.
So what kind of interested them to buy the place was he went there one day. He's like, kind of like I did. Hey, can I do a rock show here? He went there. Hey, can I do a comedy show here? And they're like, well, it's for sale. You want to buy it? And they're like, let's buy it. They bought the place with the intent of offering live entertainment, and they do. They do booked comedy nights with really really good names. They just had like Sean Patton, Dan St. Germain. They do music. We do have our cover bands. We have our original acts. They do like their drag nights. They do karaoke. They try and do as much as possible. So they bought it. I don't know which band it was. It was one of the local bands that approached them like, hey, can we play music here one night? They're like, yeah, sure, whatever. And they're like, man, that was a really cool night. So whenever I approached them, I'm like, hey, can I book music here one night? Like, yeah, sure, whatever. And the first show I booked, it was Akala, local here in Covington, For Magnitrous, one of my favorite bands out of Baton Rouge, and I feel bad. Dead Savage out of Hammond. So I'm like, man, I really like all these bands. I think they really fit well together. And I was a huge For Magnitrous fan. I didn't want to drive an hour to Baton Rouge to go see them. So, we did that. I booked that show, funny enough. It was going to be my wife and I's very first wedding anniversary. I didn't think about it. It wasn't on the calendar. Yeah. And, man, I get home. I'm like, baby, they let me book a show. Dude, I'm so excited. I'm like, I can't believe they let me do this. So nice of them. And she's like, oh, when's it going to be? I'm like, oh, it's going to be in May. And she's like, aren't we doing something that night? I'm like, nope, I checked the calendar, nothing. There is absolutely nothing on that. So I caught a lot of hell for that. But the show came, dude, it was a great turnout. I think we had like 80 people in. The owners were so happy about it. Everyone was so nice. And from there, that one show kind of evolved into what it is now, and I'm practically their talent buyer for musical acts now.
What's the capacity at that place? You said it earlier.
Capacity, legal capacity is 300, but they cap their events at 200 just to not overwhelm their staff.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. It's a big place, but also a small place.
I liked it.
Yeah,
I was comfortable there.
It's that's what we hear from a lot of people. It's got a good vibe to it. It's not dank or dark or dirty. It's very open.
It's not crowded either, like you're talking about.
It's very clean.
The Hideaway is a decent enough spread to where you got sofas that are still available.
Yeah.
And it's not an empty venue by no means during that time. It's just they have enough room.
Oh yeah, man. It's a really cool place. Some places, the smaller places you go, it's dark, it's a little smoky, you're thinking like, oh man, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, I might get stabbed. This place, it's very clean,
so y'all are stab free.
Yeah, their staff's very nice, very personable, and they just have such a killer team there. From that one show, we've expanded so much. We built out the stage, we brought in an in-house sound tech with a full sound rig.
Nice.
And they're looking to do more and more, and whenever they first opened up, they're like, man, we want to be the Southport Hall of the North Shore, in the sense that we want to offer a wide array of entertainment to the people out here. So man, before they opened up, there was no comedy shows out here. You couldn't go see a comedian.
No,
you couldn't go see some original band. You can go see cover bands, but you couldn't do any of that. There was none of that out here. I'm hoping, and I see it little by little, if there's a few places, every now and again, you might see them do like a one-off original show. And I'm hoping we see more of that out there. Mm-hmm. Because I think, I understand from the standpoint of an owner like them, they're the buyer. They have their own bills to pay. They have their own bottom line to meet. And I understand what that's like. And I think a lot of the venues, it's not that they hate original music, but
it's a gamble.
It's a gamble.
I get it.
It really is. I mean, and at the Hideaway, we gamble many a weekend. Not all of our shows are giant successes. But what I'm hoping for is, word gets around, and some of these places are like, man, maybe we could open our doors every once in a while and build the scene, and maybe we're not going to lose money that night.
Yeah.
And I think if they gave it a chance, they'd really do well. There's such a big population on the North Shore. There's no reason we can't have an active scene that rivals, Lafayette or Baton Rouge or New Orleans.
Sure. I interviewed a club owner a while back, and his go-to practice would be, take a Tuesday or a Wednesday. If a band approaches you and wants to play this coming weekend or a month from now a weekend. You say you're not getting a weekend.
Yeah.
We'll do a test on a Tuesday or a Wednesday.
Yeah.
Let's see how many people you pull. And if you could pull enough people on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and he's even giving you the curve that it's Tuesday or Wednesday, I understand, but I want to see what you got. If you could do that, then you earn the right to a weekend. Right. I think maybe if more clubs did that, then they wouldn't feel so much like they were gambling. They didn't, you know what I'm saying? They didn't feel like they were risking so much.
I agree. You know, give a band, you know, a Wednesday, a Thursday night. You know, I get it. You know, most places, you know, Monday, it's a dead night. Tuesday, give or take, you know, most places aren't open. But, you know, you're open. You know, I don't know what, you know, every single place's production costs are. Thankfully, ours aren't that high.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can do a show on a Wednesday or Thursday, invite a band in, and, you know, give them that understanding that it's a weekday. We understand you're not going to bring a lot of people out here, but let's see what you can do. The problem with the North Shore is this area has been closed off for so long that a lot of bands coming out of here, this is their very first time. They don't have fans out here. And, you know, their fan base is not driving from New Orleans because they're going to be playing in New Orleans in a few weeks. They'll go see them in a few weeks, you know, at a place that they know and they're comfortable with. So we rely heavily on our local North Shore bands, and we had some good ones. You know, there's Pius, Blackwater Canal, Thornbrick, Akala, Marsh, Dead Savage. You know, we have a pretty big pool of locals that, you know, their friends live out here. Their family live out here. They're going to come to these shows. And it's one of those things that it's a little strategic how you try and plan a show. So we've done it where it's 3 out-of-town bands, amazing killer bands. 20 people walk through the door. Bar loses money. You can't do that again.
Right.
So
you got to mix it up.
Yeah, you know, you try and boil it down to a science. It's like, okay, who can I pair with who? That it's still going to be a good night. It's not a weird lineup. And, you know, we get people out here. And it's still very much hit or miss.
Yeah. You didn't stay at Hideaway. You ventured out.
Yeah. So whenever I first started doing this, you know, I went to the Hideaway first. And I'm like, man, I really love booking these shows. It's a lot of fun.
At the Hideaway.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, it would be really cool if we did this more on the North Shore. And I went to about every music venue between Slidell and Hammond, everywhere in between.
How many are we talking?
About 20. About 20. Maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. But, and whenever I mean, I went to these places, I didn't just, you know, send them like a Facebook message. Like, I went to these places.
Sure.
And, hey, here's my business card. You know, I understand you don't know me from Adam, but, you know, give me a chance to see what we can do. Everywhere turned their nose at me, slammed the door in my face. They didn't want to work with me. I get it, you know. You know who I am.
Sure.
You know, a lot of these places, they have their in-house people already. But after that, I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm all in on this place. And I've been all in with them ever since, and I don't regret it, man. I never looked back.
Yeah.
And I think now if, you know, one of these places that originally turned their nose to me came back and said, well, man, we've been seeing what you're doing for this place. You know, maybe we could do something. I'd probably tell them no. I'm like, sorry, they take really good care of me here. I'm all in over here.
So what sparked the idea for your own promotional company?
Well, I did the one show. It went well. And I'm like, man, I loved this. I loved everything about it. I can't remember the last time before that I did something that just brought me so much joy. Everything from, you know, booking the bands to doing the flyers to all the online promotion and the ads and everything. I just fell in love with the whole process. I'm like, dude, this is so much fun. Like, it, you know, it's work, but it doesn't feel like work. It's like they say, you know, do what you love. You never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
And from there, I'm like, you know what? You know, let's see. Maybe I can make a little bit of side money off this. You know, and me, I'm very technical. I like to do everything by the book. You know, I don't skirt any of the rules. So I'm like, okay, you know, I mean, turn this in. You know, let's register it as an LLC, and you know, just see what happens. And things kept happening, and You know, the more doors opened, I found more avenues of stuff that I like even more, and it's kind of brought us to where we are today.
Yeah. Tell everybody what you're doing today, because I mean, I'm excited for you. You know, I've heard a little bit. Let everybody know what's
Yeah,
happening.
we're very excited. Earlier, it was on the 21st. I think that was last Monday, if not mistaken. We let the cat out of the bag. I've been working on this for the past 3-4 months, behind the scenes, making sure that everything is in place before we announce it publicly. But I've gotten everything in place, and we have officially taken Fuel the Funeral Promotions and Entertainment to Fuel the Funeral Entertainment, and we are a fully operating booking agency with a list of developmental services and PR and promotional services from bands. The only thing we don't do is we do not personally manage a band. We manage them as their booking agent, but as you know, to say I am this band's manager, we don't do that. That's the only thing. But if you come to us, you need booking representation, we can do that. You need a PR run, ad expertise, we can do that. You need promotional materials made, we can do that. You need a website made, we do it. EPK one sheet made, we do it. Try and offer as much as possible.
Sure.
And the services are growing by the day, because as we learn to do more and more things, we can start offering them to people.
Yeah. That's fantastic, man. I've enjoyed in my own ventures multitasking, because it's a creative outlet on so many different levels.
Yeah.
You're doing one thing over here this day, and then the next day you're doing something different. It just kind of, the variety keeps that flame going. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a lot of moving parts. And it's a lot of work, man. You know, in those 3-4 months of working behind the scenes, I mean, it was a lot of nights. You know, you work until 2-3 in the morning behind your computer, making sure that it's done the right way. So I don't want to approach these bands and say, hey, let me give you booking representation if I don't know what I'm doing, you know?
Sure.
There's enough thieves out there. I don't want to be another one of them.
Sure.
And that's what really led me to starting this venture. You know, it was about maybe 8-9 months ago. I was picked up by a newer up-and-coming management firm that also did a little bit of side booking. They wanted me to be a booking agent. And I was giddy about it. I'm like, oh man, this is going to be so cool. They have a really cool roster. You know, I'm really excited to be working with these guys. And I started working for them. And I just started noticing some things. You know, I don't want to name names or anything like that, but some of their business practices were a little less than reputable.
Uh-huh.
And I took a look and I'm like, this doesn't feel right. Like, we're taking these bands' money. We're not doing very much for them. Like, how are we justifying this? And I just took a big step back. I'm like, I don't want to do this. This feels wrong. I left that company, and after I left that company, I'm like, you know what? I was really excited to be booking for these bands. I'm not going to stop. I'm just going to do it for myself now.
Yeah.
That way, at least, because, it's not just this one company. Any small band will tell you, there's a lot of crooks out there. There's a lot of people interested in lining their pockets at the band's expenses.
Sure.
You know, whether it's, hey, sign with me and pay me a retainer every month. I'll be your manager. They don't do anything for you.
Yeah.
Or, give me X amount a month and, I'll do all this for, and then they don't do anything for you.
Yeah.
And, whenever you're a small band, if you're paying your manager $1,000 a month,
Hurts.
that's a lot of money, man. That's not, that's not coming from their merch table. That's coming from their day job paychecks.
Yeah.
They're paying you, and to know that they're getting ripped off, I mean, dude, that hurts.
Yeah.
That hurts, and that makes them so apprehensive to want to work with anyone else.
Sure.
I always tell every artist, even the ones that I sign, with every contract that I give my own bands, I'm like, take this, go to an entertainment lawyer. I know it's going to cost some money. I'm not telling you I'm a crook or anything, but don't just take my word for it, Mm-hmm. Go to an entertainment lawyer, go to other people that you may have known that have, been through a similar process. Have them look it over. Make sure that this contract that I'm giving you is absolutely in your best interest.
Sure.
Because I want you to be 100% confident that I'm in this for your best interest.
Sure. I wouldn't be surprised if honesty is the best bait out there right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's been a lot of bands that I've had a lot approach me. 'Cause, I've been working on this long before we announced it. I've got 3 bands signed to my roster. They were all signed before we announced anything, and there were dozens more that I sat down and had discussions and interviews with that were interested in booking with me. And you have to be transparent. I've had some bands say, well, look, this is what we're looking to do. We would really like to get on all the big national festivals. We'd like to jump on some of these bigger, high-profile tours. And I said, man, that's awesome. I'm not your guy. I'm still very new at this. I'm not, 30-year seasoned agent that can pick up my phone and make things happen in a day. I said, if you guys want to go do these big things, that's awesome. I love that you have these big goals, but I'm just not the right fit for you. And, it lost a lot of bands, but they appreciate the honesty.
Sure. And you might be at that point at a certain time in your career, and they're not going to forget you.
I hope to be at that point. I'm definitely not going to stop until I am at that point.
Sure, that's the goal.
But right now, I'm still very new at this. I think it's important to know what your capabilities and your limitations are and be very, very honest about it. Don't try and flub anything.
Yeah.
Don't try and, don't try to embellish anything like that. Like, I know what I can do. I'm very confident at what I can do. And I know what I can't do. And if you come to me and you ask for something that I know that I can't do, I just cannot take your money knowing I cannot do this for you. I can't do that. And it's scary. There's so many people out there that can do that.
Sure. Yeah, sleep well at night. Right? Mm-hmm. What are you, I would guess not, but are you strictly dealing in a certain genre? Or are you looking for bands in different genres intentionally?
Well, I like rock and metal. That's, my bread and butter. That's what I cut my teeth on. It's what I know best. But, if a country guy came to me, I'm not going to, turn him away. Mm-hmm. I'd give him the same treatment I give every other band. Every band that goes to my website and sends in an artist submission, or they reach out to our Facebook or our email, I give them all the same courtesy that they gave me, because they took time out of their day to go and look up my company and see who we are and what we're about and submit themselves. And we really appreciate that. They don't have to do that. Yeah. There's a lot more companies out there that do what I do. There's a lot more that are better than I am.
Yeah.
They don't have to look at me.
Sure.
And I appreciate that they do. So they're giving me the courtesy to reach out. I'm going to give them the courtesy to actually look at their material. I'm going to look them up on Spotify. I'm going to listen to at least their top songs on there.
Sure.
I'm going to look at their Facebook. I'm going to look at their Instagram. I'm going to look at their show history. And, not just be like, oh, wow, this band's pretty small. I don't ignore any emails that come my way. If you email me, it might take a day or two. I stay pretty busy, but I get back to absolutely everyone because, I appreciate that they're considering me to begin with.
Yeah. Well, that's good, man. I wish you all the best. I'm sure it's the initial phase is always the most exciting.
Yeah.
And then there's kind of coming to realization phase where you realize how big this is or how much you're in charge of,
Right.
And hopefully that happy medium sets in right about there for you.
Yeah, it's very humbling to know that these bands are, they're booking. That is the biggest part of their career, and all the bands that are serious about it, they view their band as a business, and that's what it is.
Sure. Absolutely.
And to be able to know that these bands trust me with their booking, that is so incredibly humbling. You know,
Right.
I feel honored. You know,
Sure.
it doesn't matter if, you know, they could be a, you know, world touring platinum artist, or they could be, you know, just some band looking to get around their local, you know, region. It's all the same. You know, it's so humbling to know that these guys trust me, and, you know, they have faith that I have their best intentions in mind.
Yeah, I've been humbled by dealing with any aspect of any musician's what they submit, what their career is all about, everything they offer up to us as fans, just not me in any kind of professional capacity, but just us as fans. I've always been humbled by it because it's such a gift.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
such an unbelievable gift, and they don't even know who it's to initially. They just can't help but pour their heart out, and now it's
yeah.
here in front of you, and you know, don't fuck it up. Don't shit on it.
Yeah.
You know, like give them their roses, pay them their respects. You know.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll ever lose interest in that.
It's one of those things, you know, you either have it or you don't. It's not, you know, you hear a lot of people say, oh man, these bands, you know, they make it to the big time and they forget where they came from. Well, not all of them. That's not true. You know, I've had the pleasure to meet, for example, I got to meet Vinnie Paul one night. Hell yeah, I played at the Varsity in Baton Rouge, and you know, hell yeah, I got to meet Vinnie Paul. That was crazy, and it's one of those moments that always sticks out to me. You know, it's not like the Pele Royale situation at Warped Tour where they're up and coming. You know, you kind of have to be extra nice when you're up and coming.
Sure.
Know? Vinnie Paul's been there. He's been there for 20 years. You
Yeah.
know, he's not up and coming anymore. But I'll never forget, you know, they finished their set and he came out, just came hang out at the bar, hang out at the merch table. And it was the coolest thing to watch him. Like, it was cool to meet him, but it was cooler to watch him meet other people.
Uh-huh.
So you do the same thing with every person. You know, you got to think there's like 300 people in there. Everyone wants to talk to Vinny. But knowing that, you know, I got a mob of people around me, you know, they all want my attention. He'd shake your hand, tight handshake, look you in the eye, and talk to you for about 2-3 minutes. You know, nothing big, just casual conversation.
Sure.
But in those 2-3 minutes, he kept eye contact with you, and you got that feeling like it was kind of like how we are here. It's just the two of us sitting across from each other, talking. There was no one else around, and that was such a cool thing to, you know, I'll never forget it. And then after, you know, still looking at him, watch he do that for every single person. It's one of those things. It's like, man, he didn't lose it. You know, there's a lot of musicians out there. I think, you know, the assholes get, you know, it's like the squeaky wheel gets the grease. You know, all the assholes get the attention. Like, oh man, this one singer, you know, spit on this fan at this show or whatever. Well, they're not going to talk about, you know, maybe their bassist is probably the most, you know, humble person and gave him a towel or something.
Right.
All the nice people, you know, the nice people don't get all the credit or anything. It's just the jerks, you know. You don't forget about the jerks.
The public devours the drama. You know, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Tell everybody where they can reach you in case they want to give you some submissions.
Oh, man, I'm very easy to reach. You can go to www.fuelthefuneralentertainment.com. There is a contact form on there where you can submit your band. Comes directly to my personal email. I'll look it over. There's all of our services of what we offer on there. You can reach out, get a quote. There's our artist rosters, everything on there. You can reach out to our Facebook or our Instagram. You know, send us a message. You know, I'm active on those things. I look at them and I try not to let any time roll by before it might take a day or two before I can get back to you, but I try and get back to every single person that reaches out. We're pretty easy to get a hold of, you know. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, all the social sites and everything. If you reach out and send us a message, we check those. You know, I get the alert on my phone. I'll look at it the minute I see it coming up, and the second I get some free time, I'll try and get back to you.
Yeah, that's good, man. All right, man. I really appreciate you coming, dude. Thanks,
Absolutely, man. It was a pleasure.
Cool.